So let's kick this off. We are very, very fortunate to have Karen Fortune here. Sorry for the wordplay, everyone. But going to speak on, as we talked about, cyber social engineering risk, financial theft within public entities. Again, Karen serves as the managing partner of IAG Forensics and Valuations. She also oversees the firm's commercial forensics accounting and litigation services practice. Karen has over 25 years of experience comprised of both public and private practice. So please, everybody, we can't hear you, but if you could sit back and applaud, we'll get started now. So without further ado, Karen Fortune. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, appreciate it. So yeah, everyone, we are going to be talking today about how we might be able to prevent some fraud happening in our local governments, particularly that comes through phishing and social engineering. And as Dan mentioned, I have nearly 30 years of experience in accounting, and my background is auditing. I was a CFO for a while, and I've been doing forensic accounting since about 2002. And I do specialize in fraud investigations and complex commercial litigation. So today's presentation will be geared towards a lot of the phishing, social engineering, ransomware risks that we face. But please keep in mind, I am an accountant, so this is based on my experience as a forensic accountant investigating the damages that are caused by these events. I am not an IT professional, so I'm not going to be able to explain all the ins and outs of how the hacking and the various bad actors are able to get away with what they do, but certainly have seen the harm that it causes different organizations, companies, and governments. So we're going to share a few statistics today, and this is really to, I guess, let us know why this is so important. And as you can see, there is a lot going on in this area. Of note here is that organized crime is actually really getting involved in these breaches. And so this doesn't necessarily have to be the mafia up in the northeast of the United States. It can be in Russia or Eastern Europe. It can be from China or Korea. There's a lot of different bad actors that are out there, let alone the fact that there are going to be obviously some that are stateside. Most of these breaches that are occurring are geared towards taking advantage of us financially and causing loss for their gain. And so what we see is that the way that this is happening is about a third of it is occurring because there are breaches due to stolen credentials. And so this is something that we need to be very aware of, what we put out there into the ether world, either through our social accounts or through our out of office type messages that we put out there. About a quarter of the breaches are caused by phishing, and then there's a number of them that are also caused through ransomware. Now, if we look, those were sort of the breaches in general and what's happening. If we look what's happening in the public sector, there's a lot more going on here. 61% are involving ransomware. And so this is something that we need to be extremely careful about. And the data that's getting compromised a lot of times involves personal information. So that can be taxpayer information, that could be utilities information, that could be people's bank accounts, that type of thing. But we need to be extremely careful because these breaches are occurring quite often in the public sector. The one other thing I would call your attention to, which is a little bit sad, is that in the public sector, we have a higher degree of insider involvement than we do, generally speaking, across all sectors. And so that means that we have more folks on the inside that are causing the issues. Losses that are occurring are in the billions of dollars, but based on the FBI's 2019 crime report, what it said at that point in time was, first of all, the losses are on the rise, but second of all, it's typically about $293,000 per incident. And that is before the FBI recovery team gets involved. Now, the FBI doesn't always take on a case, but that's the average loss that they're seeing per incident. If you look at the complaints, there's a number of complaints to every incident, so that's why the numbers look lower there. But it is important to know that each incident is approaching $300,000. When the FBI does take a case on, their recovery team historically has been able to recover about 79%. So that's a good success rate, but still a lot of loss. When it comes to ransomware and our local governments, this is where we can see the bad actors really ramping up. And so what we have seen between 2017 and 2019 is a 12-fold, almost 13-fold increase, where the average demand in 2017 was $30,000. Now it's an average of $380,000, with several instances where the ransoms are exceeding $1 million. So this becomes extremely costly for us, especially in our smaller governments. This can break the bank for us. So today we're going to spend in the next several minutes taking a look at what are the schemes that we need to be aware of. And once we know what those schemes are, how do we recognize them? What are the red flags? And then what are some of the internal controls, or what we say basic security measures, common sense many times, that we can employ so that we can make sure we are not the cause of some of these breaches that are occurring. And as you've probably all heard, it's not a matter of if you're going to be attacked, it's a matter of when. And so this is something we want to be very aware of. That's what this training is offering up, is just an awareness so we can recognize when a bad actor might be trying to get into our system. And as Dan said, if you have any questions along the way, it will make it far more interesting. If you guys have had personal experiences with this, if you want to share a little bit about that, or if you have a specific question, please do not hesitate. Okay, so the common schemes that we are seeing in our practice, and you may have in your particular organizations, are the following. We've got the vendor and executive impersonation. We've got phishing, which a lot of folks have heard of. There are issues that we are going to face when we are discarding technology. And then there are schemes that involve mistaken payments or a quid pro quo, the bad actors offering you something in exchange for information. And then also tech support fraud. So when it comes to vendor and executive impersonation, this is where you have an email typically, but you can get a phone call, or you can even receive a letter where the fraudster is impersonating either a vendor or an authority figure. And in that correspondence, they're going to ask you to do something, whether it's to make a payment, or whether it's to change the destination accounts for a payment. These are the types of situations where you need to be well aware of who the folks are that you're dealing with. So for example, if you have a vendor who calls you and says, we have changed the destination account, we've changed banks. We used to be with Wells Fargo, now we're going with Bank of America, just as a random example. And we need you to reroute payments. and we're going to follow it up with a letter, and we'll send you an email. That might be something that you would accept because you are hearing it from the horse's mouth, but you do need to confirm that, and not basically with the person that you're speaking with on the phone, or just accepting the terms in the email or letter. In addition, we've seen examples where an authority figure has demanded that a accounts payable person make a payment immediately. And I'm going to show you an example in a second. I've changed the names and some of the details to protect the innocent. But when you are given a rush type of instruction and you're not sure, then that's something that you want to make sure you're getting good instruction and from a real person. So here is a doctored email that we were provided, and I have changed some of the information here. But what you can see is that the email appears to be coming from John Smith, who happened to be the mayor of the particular city. And he's sending this email to one of the employees about an outstanding amount and a new invoice, and asking this person to please get these things paid up, because if they don't, the redevelopment project is going to stop immediately. A few things that you can note in this, and it will not be readily notable to you necessarily, but I want to call your attention so you can be looking for these things. In this particular situation, if you were to look at we'll call him the mayor, he was actually an executive, but we'll call him the mayor in this situation, one of the letters was actually changed out for a number. And so the 0 replaced the O. And in doing so, it was a spoofed email address. It wasn't actually the mayor's address. In addition, the mayor had been out of town, and so actually the executive in that instance, but the mayor was out of town, and because they had put in their out of office response, the automatic response, how long they were going to be gone, fraudsters knew the window of time that this person would not be available to just walk into their office. And so this person was invited to make a payment on the particular invoice, and there are instructions in the invoice to process. And so this was something, thankfully, the clerk did know to double check, but this was a good example of how somebody could have really done a lot of damage. And so you want to be looking for spoofed email addresses. You don't want to necessarily respond in an email. Thankfully, this person was able to reach out via text to their particular executive and confirm, but just want to make you aware of the risks that are out there. When it comes to phishing, and you guys are probably pretty familiar with a lot of different phishing attempts that can be made. You probably get these from time to time that'll come through where you're invited to click on something for a free credit report or apply for a lower mortgage, that type of thing. And so you are invited to click or to provide information so that you can get something in return. And so these are a number of examples that you probably frequently could see. Anytime you're invited to do something for your, let's say, bank account or your credit card, we always recommend that you just go to the normal website or contact your personal banker if you do have one, instead of responding in the email. And so here's an example of a phishing expedition where this email purportedly comes from Christopher Ray, who at the time was the director of the FBI. Now, it already looks nonsensical. If you were to hover over the email address, this sales@matimco.com, if you can see up at the top of your screen, this is what the email source address was. So this is where it's actually coming from. It's not coming from Dr. Ray. It's coming from this sales address, which obviously is bogus because the director of the FBI is not going to be a sales@matimco.com address. The other thing that you might notice in a lot of these phishing expeditions is just the extremely poor grammar, poor spelling, and the verbiage just doesn't make any sense. I just highlighted some of the fun parts of the email, and I'll just read part of it down at the bottom. I'm informing you this today because I came to notice that you're not communicating with a legitimate person who is in charge of getting these funds to you. This announcement has to be made open to you. However, because you may have been being swindled by those unscrupulous people. And so I could go on, but it's nonsensical. It is very poor English. And the idea here is that you are supposedly the beneficiary of $6.5 million. And if you only respond to this, then you can have that money. So here is where you are requested to provide personal data. And this is obviously a very nonsensical type of example. Many of the bad actors are much better at this than this particular example. But anytime you're asked to provide personal data through an email, do not do it. This is how they gain access to critical information that can lead to damages. As you can see, also, another thing that we just suggest that you look at are various email addresses that are embedded within. And obviously, the email address keeps changing, and the FBI director is not going to have an Outlook account and a Gmail account that he's sharing with us. So again, very nonsensical and funny, but also a problem if anybody were to respond to it. Here's another example where you are entitled to $3.5 million from customs if you only claim your consignment box, and there's a lot of information that they share with you here, poor grammar, poor spelling, and they ask you to respond to an email address down here at the bottom that's in blue. That email address differs from the email addresses up top. So that's already a red flag. And the fact that this, you're being invited to respond for an extremely high amount of money is also funny, but another example of just the types of things that people will try to put out there to get you on the hook. So that was phishing. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in. But we will move on to discarded technology. And discarded technology is really, it kind of goes both ways with this risk. One is when we are actually discarding old hardware or old thumb drives or cell phones, making sure that they are wiped clean. Because if you've had any sort of device and you've used it, you've probably accessed all kinds of sensitive sites, whether it be banking information, whether it be your personal social sites, whatever, or it can be any sort of tax records, that type of thing. So we need to make sure that the technology that we are discarding is clean and wiped. On the other side, if you find, and this has happened to one of our clients, somebody, a bad actor, left a thumb drive on an employee's desk. They did not know what that thumb drive was for, and they wanted to know, oh, is this a thumb drive that belongs to me, or did somebody leave it here because I need to use it? And they actually plugged it into their machine. And at that point, they inserted some malware onto their machine. And so anytime you have technology laying around or being discarded, the concern is that it's going to leave us open to some sort of manipulation by the bad guys. The other scheme that we mentioned earlier, the quid pro quo, and that's sort of similar to those phishing examples that we just looked at, and we'll look at another one here in a minute. This is where a fraudster is going to let you know that you're entitled to something if you just claim it or provide your personal information or banking information. And if you want a free meal at your favorite restaurant, just enter in this critical information online, and it's inviting you to do that. So that is a quid pro quo. Mistaken payment actually is an interesting situation. We had a law firm client that was advanced a sizable retainer from somewhere in Asia, and the idea was that they were being retained to help with a particular transaction. And so money was physically and actually wired to the law firm and put into their trust account. And in doing so, the company or the player in Asia decided, we're not going to do the transaction, so we're not going to need your help. And you need to refund us. And so this company, we'll call it the bad actor, purportedly from Asia, sent a link to the administrator at the law firm requesting that they go on this link and return the funds to their bank in Asia. And the administrator did do that, and in doing so opened up basically a pathway from the IOLTA account to the bad actor, and the bad actor was able to clean out their whole trust account, not just the retainer portion that there was being returned to them. They were able to access the entire account, and all the funds that went in there, hundreds of thousands of dollars that went in there, was able to be taken. And so that was a terrible instance of a mistaken payment, we'll call it, where in refunding the amount, the staff person accidentally opened themselves up or opened their company, their law firm up to theft. So here is another example, much like the phishing examples, and you're being notified that you have either an inheritance or a contract payment. It's kind of funny that it's one or the other, of $10,500,000, and it's because you have worked with the federal government of Nigeria. And again, anytime any of us hear Nigeria, our antennas go up, because there's always the Nigerian prince phishing examples that we've been given. But this was another email that was provided to us where they're asking for personal information. It's interesting when you see these types of things, because you'll note number 4 says bank coordinate, and we don't speak that way. And so I'm assuming that that is requesting their bank routing number and account numbers and such. But again, this is a request for you to respond and to provide very sensitive information. Okay, and then we've got tech support fraud. This is one of the more interesting fraud schemes that you'll see, and hopefully nobody has suffered from this, but if a hacker is actually able to get access to your computer, then they are able to cause pop-ups to occur. They might give you the blue screen of death. They might start pixelizing the screen, and so you're not able to necessarily work with your computer. It's essentially been hijacked, and you might get contacted then by somebody who is saying, hey, I'm going to help you. Let me help you. I'm from Microsoft, or I'm from the Computer Fix-It Center, and we just got notified that your computer has fallen prey, and we're here to help. And so that's when, if you comply or you start clicking on some of these pop-ups, you've given them access, and you don't want to necessarily navigate to some of the more sensitive sites that they can then take advantage and steal from you. So here's a sort of an example screen of what you might get where your computer has been hijacked, and if you just call this number, we can help you. And it's making you fearful that, oh no, something has really, gone wrong with my computer. We've got a problem here. And instead of contacting the support line or the person, or interacting with the person on your screen, our suggestion always is to reach out and get a hold of your IT folks or whoever is providing the real support for your IT needs. So we've covered the different fraud schemes, and now we're going to talk about some of the red flags. We're going to look at some of the outside threats that we have, and then we're going to talk about some of the inside threats that we have. So the outside threats, and we've talked about a number of these already, but if you receive an invoice that is for processing or payment, one of the things that we like to recommend is that you look at it carefully, because sometimes it may look different. And obviously people can go through rebranding, or they can change the look of their invoicing, but it's not often that happens. And we actually had a case where an advertising agency actually was given several invoices to pay on behalf of a big event, for a big event. And they started to notice, after the invoices kept growing, that the invoices didn't look like they used to. And what had happened was, one of the vendors' ex-employees used Adobe Acrobat and was able to essentially engineer an invoice that looked really close, but not exactly like their former employer's invoices. And they were able to create these invoices. They had a different bank account on there for processing, and so they stole a lot of the money. Thankfully, they were able to catch that person, and they were able to prosecute. We also recommend, as we saw in a lot of these examples, look for changes in verbiage and for just poor English, whether it's misspellings or grammar. And if you see that, obviously that may be an indicator that you've got a problem. The emergency request for funds, that is something that we always like to say, slow down, and we'll talk about that later. But anytime someone is pressuring you for an immediate transfer or immediate payment because something terrible is going to happen, obviously emergencies do happen. Obviously, there are important times where we have to be responsive. But this is an example of a way that bad actors are able to cause us to do something because we're nervous and we just need to get it done, and we don't really think it through because we're trying to be responsive. Obviously, if there's pop-ups, those are issues. And then anytime you're asked for any of your personal information or unsolicited type of informational requests come through, be very careful. Those are a lot of the outside type of threats. The inside threats that we have come down to really the internal controls that hopefully you're able to institute, but a lot of times in smaller local governments and smaller organizations, it's really hard because there's just not enough people to have separation of duties. And so you always want to have some ability to have a check and balance. And when we don't have that separation of duty, whether it's someone that's going to approve a transaction and someone that's going to execute it and needs the approval. If you're that same person, you're able to approve and execute. Obviously, that is a threat, because whether you're a bad actor yourself or if you're just being asked to do something and you don't have someone else to turn to have it approved, then you could be the cause of a problem, a cause of a loss, even though it's not really your fault because there wasn't someone else to look to. And so that's something that we always ask our clients to just be as careful as they can to figure out how they can separate duties to make sure that there are checks and balances, even if there's only a few people in the office. When personnel are accessing personal email accounts or social media at work, that opens up some risks. Certainly, anytime our social media accounts get updated for what we have going on in our lives, or if we are indicating that we're traveling or indicating that we have children or pets or that type of thing, those are ways that folks are able to equate you with your place of business and try to hook you in a phishing type of situation. So if you're a big dog lover, they might send you some coupons or some information about adopt a dog, that type of thing. Even though it may not be for real, if you click on it, then they've gotten access. And so our social media accounts are pretty important, and keeping that completely separate from work is helpful. The biggest issues that we see come down to passwords and computers that are left wide open and available to everybody else. And I'll give you an example. We actually had a case where it was a clerk of court office, and one of the staff in that clerk of court's office had her password on a sticky note inside her drawer, and her coworker knew that. And so when her coworker decided to start stealing money, stealing cash when people would come in and pay their speeding tickets or late fines and different things that they would come in to have to pay for, that the bad actor would steal the cash, but when she would enter it into the computer system as if that person had paid, she used her coworker's password. And so it appeared that the coworker was the one that was entering things into the system. And it was a fairly clever scheme, because the way that it worked was when the bad actor recorded the payments coming in, she recorded it as if it was being received in 2040. So it would have been well after her tenure in this office. The computer system allowed her to put a future date of when the money was collected, but the system knew not to hound the taxpayer or the person that got the ticket, because they had paid. It was indicated that they had paid, but because it was future dated, there was no way for the deposit slip to know that that money had come in, because the deposit slips were generated off of cash receipts for the day. All that to say, the innocent party who had her password available for the coworker to access, it looked like she was involved in the scheme. And it wasn't until we were able to determine that many of these events and these thefts happened when she was out of town on vacation, that it opened up the situation that she probably wasn't the bad actor. So do not share your passwords and don't have them open and available. And if your computer is open when you leave for lunch, or if your computer is up and you need to go to the restroom, we always say, to lock the screen, because obviously leaving it open is a danger. So some of the internal controls that we're going to talk about are pretty hopefully basic, and hopefully we're all aware of these things. But password security is super important, and it's really easy for us to use passwords that are either common to us because we want it to be easy. We can't remember the long passwords, and if we have to have different passwords, then it's really hard to remember which password goes with which program. And so we need to make sure that we are using good password security. Don't share your passwords. Don't leave it in plain view. And again, don't use simple passwords like 12345 or your pet's name and 123. What we recommend is to use long, strong passphrases with spaces and punctuation, even if it's a sentence with some numbers in it. If you can remember a sentence and you can type it and space it properly, that's a lot harder than Karen 123 or even something that we might think is pretty clever. We do want to use different passwords. There are a number of tools out there that will save your passwords in a fairly secure way. And so we recommend that you talk to your IT folks about what is the most secure way to have different passwords, but not be able to forget them. And again, don't use things that can be readily learned from your social media accounts, like your kids' names or your pets' names, or any security questions, like your maiden name or where you got married or where you were born, that type of thing. It's pretty easy for a hacker to get that information off your social media and then start running queries to find out how to get in. The internal controls that we recommend outside of the password situation is really just what you're doing now is keeping informed about different schemes and fraud risks. There are a lot of fun YouTube videos out there that you can watch about how hackers work, and there are folks that are on YouTube that mess with hackers, and those are kind of fun to watch too. But just stay informed, and any training that you're able to do, any reading that you're able to do to stay apprised of these things is going to be good, because the hackers are always trying to stay one step ahead of us or more. Don't share confidential information, and know what is considered confidential and what's not, because we may not think that our name and our birthday is so confidential, but the more information that hackers get, the more pieces to the puzzle they might have. You may have seen warnings in the media lately about not taking a picture with your COVID shot card, because there's personal information on that, and that could provide the last piece of the puzzle. Maybe it has insurance information or whatever on it, just not to post that type of thing, because you never know what they're going to use. Like I said earlier, slow down and don't just click. We say do not click until you've really thought about what you are clicking on and why. And don't plug the flash drives into your computer if you don't know where it came from, if you don't know what's on it, if you don't know the source of the information. If you see something or you suspect something, you need to report it. And that's something that hopefully you have an environment where you and your teams have the ability to report suspicious activity. And if you don't, that's something that perhaps you can work with your teams to develop and make sure that you have a chain of command to go to when you are concerned about these types of risks. Again, we say try not to use social media at work and linking it to your office accounts. It's amazing how the different programs out there are able to link us everywhere you go. If you have your Gmail account on your work device, then it already knows everything else about you, because Google is everywhere. And also we say, be careful what you put on your out of office notices. If you put on there that I'm going to be out of town for X amount of days, and if you need particular help, please contact my assistant, Jane Doe. If you do that, then Jane Doe now has been linked by the hacker to you, and so Jane Doe could be contacted, and they can say, you know, Karen asked that we touch base with you because she's out of town, and we need you to do X, Y, and Z. And that's just learned because of what we put in our out of office notice. And if Jane Doe is not taking it slowly and really considering what's happening, she may get fooled into responding to such a request, since obviously the fraudster knew that her supervisor was out of town. Other things we say is to make sure that you're confirming changes to any sort of banking information or any sort of contact information. You want to reach out by phone. Don't call the number necessarily that's in the email that they're soliciting you from. Call the previously known phone number and call a contact that you know to be legitimate at that location. If you respond in an email, or even if you try to contact through an email, is my understanding that there's already been some cities hit with spoofed emails and hacked emails, that even if you respond to a good email, it's being hacked. And so really, we want you to talk to a real person that you know to confirm any sort of changes. We also suggest that supervisors are validating and authorizing changes, that we're not just doing it on our own. Again, that kind of goes back to the separation of duties, to make sure that, you know, two sets of eyes are better than one set of eyes looking at any sort of changes. If you're asked to transfer funds, you want to make sure that you are confirming that with the real people, and don't just respond by transferring the funds without confirming it. Again, not through the email that you've been given. We want to make sure that we are protecting our data, and so one of the things that we suggest is, you know, lock up your checking account stock, so that your check stock, the paper that you print your checks on, that a lot of times already has account information on it. Go ahead and keep that locked up, because that is super sensitive information. Obviously, that's a physical protection. The other thing is keeping your ID badges and access cards around your neck if you have a lanyard, or lock it in your desk. But to leave it on your desk or leave it hanging on your doorknob or the coat hanger is not the best place for it. We also say to secure keys to the vault. We actually did an investigation for a city that has a vault in the city hall, and they had their vault wide open all day long, where people could come and go. Now, obviously with COVID, there's a lot less coming and going, but people could come and go. And if the administrative assistant left her desk, then the vault was wide open for anybody that wanted to just walk past her desk and go into the vault. They actually kept cash in there too. And when we were doing our investigation, we watched a number of people walk into the city hall when the administrative assistant wasn't there. They could have easily gone into the vault and taken something. So just keep things secured. Our shred bins, obviously, this is like the discarded technology. They have confidential information in them. And so we suggest that shred bins are kept locked until the actual shredder company comes. Be able to know who you are supposed to contact if you're concerned about something. If you see something, say something, but you got to have somebody to talk to. So know who your point of contact is, and hopefully each of your organizations does have that. And then what we suggest also, and we do this at our firm as well, is we actually have a program to test our vulnerabilities, that's a hard word to say, And so we actually have an outside consultant who will send emails to our staff to see if they will click through. And we get reports on whether or not people are clicking through. And each time that happens, then we have additional training so that they become more vigilant. And I'm happy to report for several months now, we've had no instances of people clicking through. But it's something that we have to get used to and make sure that it stays top of mind. You can also have, we'll call it a spy, to come in and just walk around to see, who's got their computers up unattended, who's got data sticks sitting on their desk unattended that somebody could just grab, who's got their lanyard or their ID badge laying around that could be swiped. And so those are the types of things we want to make sure, who has their password on a sticky note stuck to their screen. These are the types of things that you want to make sure that you're just not doing the really easy stuff for somebody to take advantage of. And so that would conclude our suggestions for internal controls. I'm sure that you guys have many, many more suggestions. Some of the links I'm going to share with you. These are some helpful links, and you don't have to write them down because Dan is going to share this presentation with you, but these were some interesting links that I came across with statistics and other things about what's going on in social engineering. And then this is my contact information if you ever have a question. Again, I'm not the IT professional, but if you, God forbid, have a loss that you suffer, then that's the type of thing that we actually investigate is if these types of things happen or if other bad acts happen, we investigate and quantify the damages. But that concludes my presentation. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and I guess Dan can share them with me. And if not, I hope that you guys have a fantastic week, and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you so much, Karen. I really appreciate that. Sorry for my delay.
I wasn't sure where you went.
Yeah, sorry. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Well, thank you so much. As I said at the beginning, we'll be sending out a recording of this presentation, and I would highly encourage you sharing that with all of your, any member of your team that uses the computer, that has any financial ties. I think this is the way to help at least start the process of training folks on how to control some of these risks. So got a thank you, very interesting from Tanya. So thank you, Tanya, for your feedback. Karen, thank you so very much. Really, really appreciate it. Great job. Keep up the good work, and we will talk later.
Thanks so much. Take care.